State Representative from District 21 here in Central and East Salem. And I wanted to just talk about the Dash 1 amendments to House Bill 3228. I will let Deputy Herring talk about our conversation that led to the introduction of the bill. But the Dash 1 amendments narrow the bill, which is about, in the current form, it's about engaging in medical use of marijuana around minors. The Dash 1s make it clear we're talking about smoking medical marijuana around minors, unless the minor is authorized by having a card themselves to actually be able to use medical marijuana. You know, in general terms, not a huge fan of smoking around children, period. I think the deputy can talk about experience he's had as a school, an officer in a school with students who have been exposed to medical marijuana in an enclosed environment that he told me about that I think would be interesting for you to hear. And with that, I'll be quiet.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Barker and the rest of the committee. It's a privilege and honor to be in front of you talking about this today. My name is Senior Deputy James Herring with the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Been with the office close to 27 years. My passion for this bill is children, the protection of children. During my experience, what we're talking about is when I go to respond to a house, we walk into a house that is you cannot see 5 feet in front of you. To make that point, from here to that projector is where a 2-week-old child was in her little rocker coughing, while approximately 5 to 6 others were sitting around in chairs where the person with the license for the medical or the permit for the medical marijuana was smoking a bong, filling the house full of marijuana smoke. All individuals in that room, of course, showed signs of use of marijuana. The child, of course, that makes you sad and makes you angry, and where the problem comes in is because the person who's using the marijuana is smoking it legally, there is no crime. So that poor child who is coughing and showing these signs of use of marijuana, the baby, there was nothing we could do. I am a school resource officer for Huck Middle School and Adam Stevens Middle School. Now we're talking about middle schoolers, where we go to the houses and we're dealing with children who come to school with the signs and effects of marijuana on their person. They smell of marijuana, their eyes are big and black, they're usually late, or they don't come to school at all. Their grades are very poor. Conversely, when we look at students who are actually out purposely using marijuana, you have the same effects. You go to the house, I'll open up the door, and I get blasted. Unfortunately, I was inhaling at the same time I opened up the door and was blasted with the child's parent, her mother, and I was underneath the effect of marijuana smoke. Because again, the mother had a card to smoke medical marijuana, was smoking it legally, however, using a bong, filling the house full of marijuana smoke. The story goes on for several of these students. The bill, again, you know, there is nothing we can do because the marijuana is being smoked legally because the person who's smoking the bill, who's smoking the marijuana, is the parent who has the card. Inside the house, again, 4 to 6 others, some couple had warrants, are sitting around, again, all showing effects of smoking marijuana. However, again, the person smoking it was legal to do so. So there is no crime. So I went to Mr. Clem with his request for this bill, and I appreciate your time listening to this bill, again, for the children, so that we can get the children away from marijuana. And it's not attacking the use of the medical marijuana person. They can smoke anywhere. Just please don't smoke it around children, where they're being affected and their schooling's being affected, you know, dealing with smoking or being around the marijuana smoke.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Jerry.
Thank you. It's probably too late to amend this. I was proposing to. It would be nice if someone would do something about the growing and manufacturing and
Microphone.
the growing and manufacturing of medical marijuana in residences where 18 or under, or persons under the age of 18, so minor children also live. That's a huge problem too, in my opinion. I mean, people just grow marijuana and medical marijuana and deal with all the transactional stuff that occurs there, and there'll be people, minors, living there, observing the whole thing. So I will propose an amendment, but that's my thoughts on it.
Mr.
Yes, attorney.
Okay, so we have roughly about 60 people that under OMMP that are registered under the age of 18 that have medical marijuana cards. What would you do with those? I mean, I realize you're targeting just age 18, but what about those that are under age 18 that have a card and also have families?
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Wilson. The Dash 1 amendments say that there's an exception to the prohibition on smoking around a minor unless the Oregon Health Authority has issued a registry. Well, there's a prevention of smoking around a minor unless the Oregon Health Authority has issued a registry identification card to the person who is under 18 of age. So if they are on the registry, as you mentioned, they're exempt from the prohibition. Because they have a card. And I met with my DA's office about, my first thought was, couldn't we do something under child endangerment if it's really that bad, or some other charge? And Walt, or the District Attorney Baglaw, put me in touch with the people in his office who would do something like that. They said, no, there is not a useful statute for this situation for them to do anything about it, because then they'd get into a whole scientific debate about whether or not, you know, it was endangering to be smoking them around, and they don't have the resources to win every single one of those cases. Whereas if we presume that it's not good to be smoking around children in an enclosed space, whether frankly it's a car or marijuana, you know, it's easier for them to do these kind of cases.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next call, Leland Berger, Becky Strauss, and Anthony Taylor. Welcome to my house.
Good one out. What do I have to do?
And again, I will ask you, please keep it short.
Thank you. Chair Barker, members of the committee, Becky Strauss here on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon. Many of our concerns with the bill seem to be addressed with the Dash 1. We were worried about smokeless use and also what happens when the cardholder is younger than 18 years of age. But I also want to just raise some other questions and pose the question whether this is really the direction we want to be going with this program. I think in regard to things that the Dash 1 does not fix, I'm curious about the situation where possibly someone younger than 18 is a caregiver in a house. I mean, the legislature we've made a commitment here in Oregon that the use for medical purposes of marijuana is lawful, and this is for the benefit of patients. And so, for example, the caregiver in the home, this would seem to impact the care of the person who really needs it for medical purposes. So I think that what we're doing here is contemplating going down the road of recriminalizing patients who are often very ill, sometimes terminally ill, and use this for the very little relief that they can find. And so we're urged to just, I think it's our recommendation that we do not go down that road with this program, but certainly want to pose the question. And I just also would insert here that there are very few other situations where we would regulate very sick patients in their homes about how they're using their medication, and so I would suggest that we don't do that in this area. Thank you.
Representative Barker, or Chair Barker, members of the committee, my name is Leland Berger. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing for 30 years. I represent patients and their providers statewide. I'm actually today en route to Gold Beach, where I have an appearance tomorrow morning. I'm up here today on behalf of Compassion in Oregon in opposition to this proposal. I can tell you that I've been coming to the legislature since 1999, after the law passed in '98, and when Kevin Maddox chaired this committee, Donna Nelson, a representative from Yamhill County, asked me about secondhand smoke, and I told her then that there were no studies at all indicating any harmful effect from secondhand smoke, and I can tell you today that that's still the case. There's no science to support the deputy's claims, and the notion that smoking a bomb fills a home challenges reality, I think. The concern I have specifically about the amendment is, and it's important to remember the construct of the Medical Marijuana Act, 475309 accepts patients and their providers from arrest, prosecution, and forfeiture so long as they stay within the limits and don't do the prohibited things. This would add a new prohibited thing in 475 319, and as I read this amendment, if a parent were medicating, using their medical cannabis at night in the kitchen while the kids were asleep upstairs, they would lose their protection of the Medical Marijuana Act. Now, those cases are already being prosecuted in places where, like Washington County, where there is extreme prejudice against, medical marijuana, or here in Marion County. The other thing, I know that the deputy sheriff and the representative are, care about children. There are other remedies for this. I mean, the advice I give to patients when they ask me, well, what about DHS coming and taking my kids? Not talking about being arrested for anything. The advice I always give is to treat it as if it were a dangerous medicine, which of course it is not. But that's important to do. You had asked Representative Hicks about gardens, and I always recommend that patients who have minor children in the house keep it in a place where it's locked. And in my experience, even in cases where they're criminally prosecuted, that's mostly what happens. And I think the same is true about the responsible therapeutic use of medical cannabis. I don't disagree that there are people like the deputy described that are not responsible about their therapeutic use, but overwhelmingly patients are. And there already is adequate protection for children through the Department of Human Services. Department of Human Services is, I don't do family law except when a medical marijuana parent is, there's a petition that the behavior, conditions, and circumstances warrant the state taking temporary custody of the children, and inevitably that relates to the kinds of situations the deputy described. So I can tell you those kinds of proceedings and that kind of mechanism to protect children already exists. Please don't criminalize people for their therapeutic use of medical cannabis by adopting this resolution or this bill. Thank you, Chair Barker.
Thank you.
Chair Barker, members of the committee, my name is Anthony Taylor, and I am the Director of Compassionate Oregon. And I come before you today to ask you to reject this bill. Initially, it called for immediate proximity, and now the amendment, the -1 amendment, expands it to the whole dwelling unit. So that means that the parents, like Mr. Berger said, parents medicating in the kitchen or in the garage, the minor is within the confines of the building, you've got a violation. And these, typically, again, as Mr. Berger said, most of the patients that are using cannabis do so with their children in mind if there's children in the house. They don't smoke it in front of them. They keep it locked up. They are very careful about residues or any cross-contaminations or anything of that nature. And I would just encourage the committee to reject this proposal, because it's really a, what do they call it, a solution in search of a problem. It's just another way for, prosecutors to stack more charges on and, get to enhance the penalties of what they're going after. So again, thank you for your time here, and I encourage you to oppose this amendment in this way.
Okay, thank you very much. Close the public hearing on House Bill 3228, carry over to session. And I have an announcement that the concentrated resolution 1 is being set over until Thursday night.
Thank you so much.
Regan Municipal established by rule medical marijuana facility registration system for the transfer usable marijuana between grow sites and registry identification card holders. Establishes minimum requirements for facility application, location, and security. Requires OHA conduct criminal background checks of facility applicants and refuse registration. Responsible individuals prior felony drug conviction. Requires facility to test marijuana for pesticides, mold, and mildew. Requires facility to receive authorization for registering card prior to receiving marijuana from grow site. An exempt facility for marijuana plant and usable amount limits. It allows OHA to inspect facility and records to ensure compliance. allows registration card holder to remain in this facility for normal customer costs of doing business, requires OHA notify former facility of registration card holder change of facility, which declares an emergency effective on its passage.
Do we have a motion on House Bill 3460, please?
3460, Mr. Chair, I move House Bill 3460 to the floor with a due pass recommendation and that the bill be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Representative Kenny Guyer moves House Bill 3460 to the floor with a due pass recommendation that the bill be referred to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I just had a question. I didn't remember any opposition to this bill. In our public testimony, there was none, right?
Public.
No public opposition anyway. Well, just one quick comment and to follow that up. I'm not sure I understand the best way to deal with the medical marijuana issues. I'm not sure this is it. I'm comfortable with moving it to Ways and Means, but I cannot stand here and say that I think this is the right way to stop movement of marijuana from medical use into the black market. I can't say for sure that I understand the current system well enough to know that this is an improvement. I think it is, but I mean, I don't know. It's a little obscure to me what the right way to regulate this system might be. So, yeah, I'm not commenting that for any reason, certainly not to argue one way or the other, but I just thought I'd throw that out.
Is there any other discussion? Yes.
Well, I'll just say I don't think this is the be-all and end-all. I think there's a long way we have to go in trying to regulate medical marijuana, and it doesn't get after growers. But I think in terms of distribution, I think certainly the testimony from Tom Chamberlain, whose son is paralyzed and doesn't know where to get marijuana and doesn't necessarily want to have a relationship with growers. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think one of the really compelling pieces of this to me was the public health aspect of testing for mold and mildew and pesticides, which apparently is a huge issue. So people have a medical issue, they go to get medical marijuana, and then end up with additional health consequences. So again, I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, but I think it's a really important piece of the puzzle. So strong support.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think this is a start. I think we had another bill, Representative Buckley's bill, I was very supportive of because it brought a lot of accountability into the system. This brings a little more accountability into the system, but I hope we look at working with Representative Buckley's bill probably in February to actually implement a lot of the parameters that they had in that bill. There are a lot of sideboards to really track the marijuana, where it's going, who's using it, and to hold actual card holders accountable for their prescriptions so they didn't get out to the public. Because one of the problems we have in my community is there's guys that are growing this in their backyard, and it's weird, there's not a lot for patients, but there's a lot getting into our school system, and it's very prevalent in the education system right now. And if these kids get caught with it and they could actually trace the marijuana where it came from, it would be very powerful in stopping people from selling it to children who don't need it. So.
It says Representative Buckley's bill.
You mean his other bill?
His other bill.
Yes, Representative Thompson.
I'm going to support this today. I agree with Representative Conger. I've got all kinds of mixed feelings about it, but I think it is our responsibility as a state, if we're going to authorize the use of medical marijuana, which we have done, that we do what we can to ensure a safe, quality supply for the people authorized to use it. And we've not done that up to this point. It's been very haphazard. I'm also hoping to getting the Oregon Health Authority involved in some oversight on this system might give us more information on things that we need yet to do. So I see this as a first tiny step toward developing a professional, scientific medical marijuana program with lots more work that needs to be done.
call the roll, please?
Representative Clem?
Aye.
Representative Conger?
Aye.
Representative Parker?
Aye.
Representative Cammer?
No.
Representative Lively?
Aye.
Representative Widener?
Aye.
Rep- Vice Chair Kenny Guyer?
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson?
Aye.
Chair Greenlee?
Aye. Motion carries. House Bill 3460 is on its way to Ways and Means. Close the work session on House Bill 3460. Open the work session on House Bill 3403. Can you tell us what that's about?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, House Bill 3403, which with the -2 amendment, establishes a healthy vending task force to explore current local state initiatives to promote and evaluate worksite nutrition and explore strategies for increasing the sales of healthy food and beverages at vending machines. Sunsets the task force on convening the 21st Century.
Honor, I think that's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 794 has a -2 amendment that replaces the bill that allows for reciprocity from other states for engaging in medical use of marijuana and possess less than 1 ounce of marijuana, eliminates the requirement to list a grower on a marijuana grow site registration system if the patient does not use a grower or produces marijuana themselves. It has minimal revenue impact and a minimal fiscal impact. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. And let's go ahead and call up Anthony Taylor and Jeff Sherman, please. Anthony, why don't you go and get started? We'll see if Mr. Sherman has.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Anthony Taylor. I'm Director of Compassionate Oregon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in favor of Senate Bill 794. I would like to testify more specifically to the reciprocity part of the -2 amendments. And I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, the 4 states currently allow non-resident medical marijuana patients to use or possess medical marijuana within those states. These states are Arizona, Maine, Michigan, and Rhode Island, and are listed for your review, along with the relevant statutes in my submitted testimony. The state statutes shown in the chart are similar, yet simple. Non-resident patients who meet the conditions of the medical marijuana laws of their own state may use or possess medical marijuana in another state that has adopted its own medical marijuana laws. As noted at the bottom of the chart provided, Oregon does not have a reciprocity law per se, but we do allow non-residents to obtain a registry identification card through the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. This, of course, requires any non-resident patient to go through the same process in obtaining the necessary authorization and subsequent card that any Oregon patient would be required to go through. This process may take up to 60 days or more, making it impractical for any patient simply passing through, visiting friends and family, or just spending time enjoying our great state. With this in mind, it seems like a simple step to allow patients visiting Oregon the courtesy this bill would offer. We are bordered by 3 states that allow medical marijuana, not the least of which is Washington. And we are not asking for the state to allow Washington or Colorado residents to come into Oregon with recreational marijuana. But we are asking you to make an allowance for their medical marijuana patients. So we urge the committee to adopt the -2 amendments and pass Senate Bill 794. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jeff Sugarman. I'm testifying today on behalf of Oregonians for Medical Rights, and I wanted to address the section of the bill that deals with grow site registries. During our discussions with the Attorney General's office and the OMMP program through the Health Authority on House Bill 3460, we were made aware of a situation where today all patients who get a card are required to register a grow site or identify someone who grows it for them. What we heard in testimony last week in the House Health Care Committee was that there are many patients who do not have a grower and who do not grow for themselves, yet they are still required by law to register an address as a grow site. What this amendment would do is simply allow the Health Authority and the OMMP program to require that site be registered should that patient use one. But if they don't have a grow site and they don't have a grower, they would just simply check a box that says they're not growing. And that's the intent of the amendment. It will do two things. One is it will reduce the number of registered grow sites because there are thousands of patients who register a site but don't actually grow. And secondly, it will give us a tool to determine exactly how many patients are not growing and are using the services of one of the dispensaries that's operating in the state today. And we urge you to adopt the amendment and with a due pass recommendation. Thank you.
All right, so we're talking about the dash twos, and let's see if there's any questions first. Senator Roseland.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the other states that have medical marijuana cards. Are the cards distinctive enough that we know, and would our law enforcement officers know and know what to expect with respect to these other states we're asking to have reciprocity?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Rowland, my understanding is that most states do have cards in except for California, and I think they just have to carry the authorizing paperwork from the physician.
Now, my understanding, the research that has been given to me, that every state has some means of requiring some type of identification, whether it be a specific card. Yeah, no, it's, and my understanding that they actually have, designated that if they're part of their medical marijuana program, or as what I heard too, and I'm not sure if it has changed, but California did at one point have to require just the paperwork from the doctor, but it actually expressed to the states that, so it'd be just basically like if you were carrying SR22 forms, you'd have to show that to the officer at that time, or then you, if not, then you can cite it, and then you could have a affirmative defense based on going to court. So let me just say, when this was brought to the chair's attention, the chair said that basically that I was not comfortable with it just being open-ended as it was going to, as had been proposed, that this would be requiring the individual not to have more than an ounce. That is a violation in our state in the sense of non-criminal. I can see that this makes some sense that if a person is traveling into the state, that they'd be able to have their medicine so long as it's within a reasonable amount. And since it's only a violation, I felt that less than an ounce would be appropriate as compared to someone having multiple ounces and could be doing other things than just having medicine. So other discussions or questions? All right. Thank you very much. Was there anyone else who wanted to give testimony on 794? Seeing anyone will close the work, the public hearing on 794. And I believe we have the paperwork on. Open up a work session on Senate Bill 794.
Major Teresa Kelly, the Portland Air National Guard, and Associate Professor, the Maranatha Church of God in Portland.
Good morning to you. Many of you may find yourselves as senators to be the brunt of jokes, or you hear your neighbors even complaining about those people down at the Capitol and the people in Washington. But I want you to know today that there are many more people who appreciate the work that you do, the long hours that you spend, the dinners that you have away from your family, all for the good of the order. The Bible actually teaches us to pray for our leaders. One church leader says to the other, Paul writes to Timothy, that we should, as believers, pray for all people, but especially for our leaders. And you may ask the question, well, why especially for them? For the good of the order, the Bible says, that we can live peaceably before God and with one another. Pray with me to these ends. Holy God, I pray for the leaders in this hall today. May you give them wisdom and guide their hearts and their minds as they make decisions that affect our state, our nation, and our world. In your holy name I pray, amen. God bless you.
I want to thank Senator Lee Byron for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And of course, I want to thank the good pastor, Teresa Kelly, who just presented that invitation. Thank you. Under courtesies visiting the Capitol today, students from Heritage Elementary School, which is in Woodburn, students from Trust Elementary School, and that is in Canby, students from Port Orford, and that is located in Port Orford. I do not see the students in our galleries as of yet, but I hope the word will reach them that at this time the Oregon State Senate extends its courtesies and good wishes to those students. We hope they're having a good day in their state capital, and we hope they'll be here and stay throughout the day and come back and see us many, many times. Okay, now with that, I'm now going to recognize Senator, please, Senator Starr, Senator Bruce Starr, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have some guests on the floor this morning. They're guests that have come a very, very long ways to join us here on the Senate floor, all the way from Cameroon. Mr. President, even if I had the names in front of me and I could try to read them, I wouldn't do them justice, I would guarantee you that. But sitting with me is the king of a village in Cameroon that has 16,000 residents. And the princess is sitting with Senator Beyer, and sitting next to me in Senator Cruz's desk is Joseph, and Joseph is actually a constituent of mine that lives in Forest Grove. My father is on the side off, is traveling with this group today. We just wanted to offer courtesies and welcome you to the Oregon Senate today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, the King and the Princess and Joseph, really, it's a high honor to have you on the floor. I've already met with you sooner because the good Senator Charles Starr brought them to my office. We came on here, we took pictures here. It's a really high honor. And I hope you'll stay on the floor, stay with us a long time. And I hope you make sure that I get a visit to the great country of Cameroon sometime. I really would like to go there. So I've never met a king before. And my wife's a princess, so I have to say that. You do understand. My wife is a princess. So, but I want to acknowledge you too, the King and the Princess of Cameroon, and you, Senator Charles Starr, there he is, and he knows how strongly I feel about him. He was able to interpret the name for me, Senator Bruce Starr. You might talk to your father sometime, your father. So we're really it's a high honor and a privilege to have you here. Stay as long as you like. I really like your clothing. Oh, do I like your clothing? And I hope that you feel the warmth that we feel for you. So thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Starr, for that very nice introduction. Recognize Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, please extend courtesies of the Senate to Rosemary and Joseph Pellicier and Raoul Vandenhype, who are representatives from Angel Flight West. We'll be hearing a little bit more about Angel Flight West later when we do a resolution in their honor. But they have come today to represent an organization that provides inordinate numbers of volunteer service hours to Oregonians across the state, helping them be with loved ones and access appropriate
Okay, again, right now, Rosemary, Joseph, Balu. They said it right, but if you're here, I want to welcome you and acknowledge you guys. Senator Brian Boquist, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. SB 281 comes out of the Committee of Judiciary on a 3-2 vote. The definition includes, we'll be adding the definition of debilitating medical condition of post-traumatic stress disorder for the purpose of Oregon's Medical Marijuana Act. Includes within the definition the debilitating medical condition for the side effects related to the treatment of cancer, glaucoma. These are existing ones, Alzheimer's disease, so on and so forth like that. This did come out as a 3-2 vote. There were 3 amendments that were proposed in committee. I think all 3 of those amendments are continuing to have discussion. We'll have discussion in the House. One was an implementation issue from the state police. The other one was how to address the Second Amendment issue. If you're not aware, under the federal law, if you are diagnosed with PTSD and receive a benefit, a cash benefit from that, then you're automatically put into the mental health category in regards to the Second Amendment. With that, Mr. President, it's a good bill, should pass. I'm sure there are questions. Thank you.
Recognize, now we're on a discussion. Recognize Senator Jeff Cruz, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I voted against this bill for some of the reasons the carrier mentioned, but the main reason I voted against this bill is we continue to talk about marijuana as a medicine, and we continue to treat it as something different. In the state of, on the national level, marijuana is still a Schedule I narcotic, whether that's right or wrong, it's reality. In the state of Oregon, it is a Schedule II narcotic. And wouldn't it be reasonable if we treated it in the same manner we treat other Schedule II drugs? And a Schedule II drug, you really can't, with rare exceptions, get a prescription that's longer than 30 days, in some cases 60. And especially when we're dealing with PTSD, which is a mental issue, to just give somebody a prescription for a drug and nothing else really isn't good health care. We know that. It takes counseling, it takes lots of other things. And so my amendment basically would have required a check back in every 60 days with the doctor, and if the doctor at that point thought that it was still a valuable medicine, then he could reauthorize the prescription. That was the amendment. Now, you also need to know that PTSD in this bill is not restricted just to service people. It could be anybody who could claim that they have had a traumatic experience. PTSD is very real, but around the edges, I think it could be something people can play with. And I will point out that in the current medical marijuana program, you can get a marijuana card for pain. Okay, number one, I still argue whether marijuana is an appropriate analgesic for pain, but the fact is that you can claim, if you go to the right provider, that your knee hurts and get a medical marijuana card. Mr. President, we've had this program in the state for a long time. We continue to talk about marijuana as medicine, and I continue to advocate for, if indeed it is medicine, let's start treating it like medicine and not something entirely different. And that is the reason I voted against this bill.
Recognize Senator Tinker, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill just goes to show what can happen in this joint when things really get rolling. I sat in on the testimony and the Healthcare Committee on this issue. And there was compelling testimony from mostly veterans, but others, about how this provided some relief. I am not a supporter of legalization of marijuana. In fact, I do believe, like my colleague from Southwestern Oregon, that there does need to be some sideboards and limitations that are reasonable that be put on this. But as my good colleague suggested, there are a significant list of things that you can get medical marijuana for. And I don't think adding this to the list is going to harm anything or anybody. But we did hear testimony from people that said this was the only relief that they could get from the trauma that they received and the diagnosis that they received from PTSD. So, colleagues, while I do not support legalization of marijuana and have been somewhat critical of this program in the past, I am going to vote for this bill for those reasons, and I would encourage you to consider the same. Thank you.
Recognize Senator Fred Girard.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, this is a perfect example of what a slippery slope does. When we first approved the medical marijuana, which is I think an initiative, they were talking about it really only affecting a small number of people. Now, in my district alone, we had one physician that offered 6,000 scripts at $200 a pop. And it was for everything from pain to who knows what. So this is now something that's totally out of control. And I wouldn't be so opposed to it if my hospitals were coming to me and asking for some containment on this, because they are legal scripts. Now you can have doctors, dentists, nurses that are under marijuana performing surgeries or other critical operations. You can have a crane elevator that's taking medical marijuana. I'm sorry, marijuana is not a useful drug. It just truly isn't. It's a known carcinogen. We have a whole aisle that hates cigarettes. This is worse. This stuff is absolutely bad for you. So why we keep adding and picking away and giving more reasons to write these scripts, I can't go down there. I just can't. There's better medicines and there's better treatments than enhancing this program, which has become a total failure in this state.
Recognize Senator Lori Monahan Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I am against legalization of marijuana. There's no question about that. But I'm looking at it from the patient's point of view. And when you have someone that has flashbacks, or nightmares, and cannot sleep, and marijuana, we have something that will take care of that and allow them to not have flashbacks, to be able to sleep, and to not have nightmares, that person should be allowed to have it. And marijuana has been shown to do this. That's why I am voting yes. I am very concerned about the effects that marijuana has on brain development of our young. I am very concerned about the sideboards that we still don't have in this state on the use of marijuana and in driving, etc. But colleagues, you have to think of the patient who is going through some terrible event, had gone through some terrible events in his life, and this is the only thing, not drug, not a pill, but this is one thing that helps them. So I will be a yes. Thank you.
Recognize Senator Floyd Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to the bill.
The bill.
Mr. President, this bill was referred to the Judiciary Committee and put out as one of those 3-2 votes. I will tell you the compelling issues and statements I heard from veterans who actually come back having real difficulty being able to function and using other type of pharmaceuticals that actually took them out of being able to function. But they have found a means to actually be able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, and actually be able to maintain a life. I think this is something that we should be willing to move forward and protect those individuals who have in fact suffered and still continue to suffer and found their way. The individuals that do in fact have PTSD are looking for us to give them an opportunity to deal with their issues and deal with it in a way that they can actually function in society. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, back, I mentioned the USO, mentioned Korea. Back in those days, I was a narcotics investigator. There's a lot of marijuana out there. It's been around for a long time. My concern with this bill is the fact that if we allow those folks to continue with their life, to try to expand their life and support their families, what do we say to the employers as these people come in stone? We tell the employers that it's imperative upon you to make certain that your workers are not inhibited by drugs. But we turn around and we allow them to smoke these drugs and use these drugs and then go to work. We allow them to drive stoned. I don't know that this is the best thing we can do for these folks. I understand the responsibility that we have to help them with their PTSD. But, you know, you could sit down with a bottle of Jack Daniels and listen to Charlie Daniels and probably get the same effect. I don't think that this bill is going to be beneficial to these folks, and I don't think it will be beneficial to those people that must employ them. Thank you, Mr. President.
I'll recognize Senator Doug Whitsitt, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, the active ingredient that we're looking for in marijuana is the THC, of course, and with the new genetically modified plants, that level is quite variable. Some of the more natural plants will have a THC concentration of around 1%. They've had actually found genetically modified plants in Oregon that were approaching 30% THC. It's a 3,000% change variable dosage. I know of no drug anywhere that is ever prescribed with that kind of variation. So not only is it inappropriate, but it's dangerous. And for that reason, I'm voting no. Thank you.
Recognize Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to comment on a couple of things I've heard today from some of our colleagues. The first is the issue of whether people who use marijuana from a medical perspective are impaired in other aspects of their life. I would point out to you that there are many people who are responsibly using other controlled substances, opiates, to control chronic pain, who perform their functions, their regular work functions appropriately because they're using their medications appropriately. Because when people have pain that's being managed by opiates, those receptors, those pain receptors, if you will, soak up the medication, and it doesn't affect their cognition, their ability to function. And we have people in this building around the state who are functioning well while using narcotics on a daily basis. I believe the same to be true about marijuana, and I do not believe that people who are using it appropriately for medical purposes will show up to work stoned or otherwise impaired. I understand that concern, and I just wanted to clarify that from the medical perspective. Is my understanding of the medical perspective. The second is with regard to the issue of concentration. I completely agree. We've got a huge problem there. I personally would be very clear, I've been clear, we should legalize it, and that would allow us to regulate it. It should be a federal Schedule II drug so that we know exactly what we're giving to people. We should be prescribing it. But there are a lot of things in medicine that we do now that are not evidence-based. So whether we actually have really hard evidence about PTSD, I don't know. We don't have great evidence about some other things that we do, either allopathic or other forms of medicine now, but we know they help some people. I appreciate the concerns that you've raised, but I'll be a yes vote as a physician wanting to offer the most services to my patients.
Further discussion of the measure which is now before us. Senator Ronnie Golden, you wish to close.
I do, thank you, Mr. President. I've heard a lot of debate on the floor today about a lot of things that have nothing to do with this bill. Employers have the right, if people are impaired, to have them out of their workplace. People driving impaired will be arrested. This bill doesn't change any of those things. We have written bills and been very specific about how we interact with people using any drug. The drugs that our previous speaker talked about will impair people if used inappropriately, and they can be arrested for driving, and they can be told they can't work. This bill says that people who can legally prescribe in Oregon a drug, who believe it can work and help a person with PTSD, whether that's a military person or an abused person who is having difficulties getting their life under control, can be prescribed with the physician's care and hopefully resume their life. If you actually listen to the testimony on the day of the hearing, with the number of people who came forward and said, yes, I have been under the care of a physician in the military, and they have prescribed me some very, very heavy drugs to deal with my issues. Obviously, they recognized the person had the problem. And while on those drugs, I was not worth it. My life was not worth living. It was very frustrating. I could not do the things that I needed to do when I was on the drugs. And even though I will lose benefits because the federal government has a different law, when I have used marijuana, it has allowed me to live a productive and normal life. We don't have a lot of research because, as was stated before, the federal government has rules that don't really allow all that to happen. And therefore, we don't have it as a scheduled drug because we don't have the research and the way it should be handled as any other drug is, which really has frustrated me for a long time. You know, personally, having lived with an uncle who was a World War II veteran, who was a prisoner of war, who I believe now in retrospect, having not understood PTSD as a child, definitely suffered from many of those things and had a difficult time in his life with his anger and other kinds of activities. And I wish that there had been something that would have helped him relieve some of those demons in his life. We didn't have that. We didn't have this conversation. So I'm asking you here to consider those people who have made a decision on their own, to find solutions for their lives, who have physicians who believe it is the right solution for them, to be given the opportunity to do that and to add it to the list of drugs that we're already allowing physicians, the list of conditions that we're already allowing physicians to prescribe for. I urge your support.
The question now arises upon the third reading and the final passage of Senate Bill 281. Those of the opinion the bill shall pass will say aye. Those opposed, no. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thompson? Whitsitt? Winters? Fairchiver?
Yes.
Bates?
Aye.
Byer?
Aye.
Boquist?
Aye.
Burdick? Close? Devlin?
Aye.
Dingfelder? Edwards?
Yes.
Ferrioli? George?
Aye.
Gerard? Hansel?
No.
Pass? Johnson?
No.
Knope?
Aye.
Cruz?
No.
Mons Anderson?
Aye.
Monroe?
No.
Olson?
No.
Brzezinski?
Aye.
Roebling?
Aye.
Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Shields?
Aye.
Starr?
No.
Steiner Hayward? President Cordy?
Yes.
Voting no. Close. Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Cruz, Monroe, Olson, Starr, Thompson, Whitsitt. 19 aye votes.
The Senate Bill 281 have received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 396 relating to execution of property and declaring an emergency.
Recognize Senator Chip Shields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 396.
You want to say anything before I turn it off, Glenn?
Yes, good night.
Good night. God bless you all, every single one of you.